I never planned to reveal my position this way, but my mother-in-law Barbara's constant sabotage finally pushed me too far. As I sat at her pristine dining table, watching her gloat about my supposed failure, I thought back to how this all started. 3 months ago, when James and I decided to keep my promotion a secret, it seemed like a smart move. The Matthews family had run Matthews Corp for generations, and Barbara never missed a chance to remind me I was just the girl from accounting who had trapped her son. If she found out I'd been appointed CEO instead of James, she'd make his life unbearable. Elizabeth passed the potatoes. Barbara's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. She'd placed me at the far end of the table, as usual, between James's teenage cousins, who were too busy texting to notice the tension. "Did you hear about the company gala?" Barbara asked the table at large, her voice dripping with false concern. "Elizabeth made quite a scene, didn't you, dear?" James tensed beside me. We both knew what was coming. The gala had been my first public appearance as CEO, though only the board and a few key executives knew my true position. Barbara, as the former CEO's wife, had attended with her usual air of entitled ownership. "I was simply networking," I replied calmly, buttering my roll. 5 years of marriage to James had taught me never to let Barbara see me sweat. "Networking?" Barbara laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Is that what you call spilling wine on the regional director's wife and then arguing with the CEO about company policy?" I hadn't spilled anything. Barbara's friend had knocked into me, and that CEO she'd seen me arguing with was actually my VP of operations, discussing our new sustainability initiative. But Barbara had already constructed her own version of reality. "Mom," James started, but Barbara wasn't finished. "I heard from Patricia in HR," she continued, addressing the entire table. James was next in line for CEO, following family tradition. But after Elizabeth's embarrassing display, the board is reconsidering. The table fell silent. James's father lowered his newspaper slightly. His sister Amanda stopped feeding her baby to stare. Even the texting teenagers looked up. "Barbara," I said quietly. "I don't think." "Well, that's obvious, isn't it?" Barbara interrupted. "You never think about how your actions affect this family. James has worked his entire life for this position. His father was CEO, his grandfather built the company, and now because of you." "That's enough, Mom," James said, standing up. His napkin fell to the floor. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Barbara's eyes gleamed. "Patricia told me the new CEO is being announced next week, and it's not James. I suppose you'll be happy now, Elizabeth. You finally managed to destroy my son's legacy." I looked at James, seeing the struggle in his eyes. We'd agreed to keep my position quiet until the formal announcement, but his mother's accusations were pushing him to the breaking point. He'd supported my career from day one, even when it meant going against family expectations. "Actually, Barbara," I started, reaching for my purse. "About that announcement." The dining room door swung open as Barbara's housekeeper hurried in. "Mrs. Matthews, Mr. Roberts from the board of directors is here. He says it's urgent." Barbara's face lit up. "Send him in. He's probably here about the CEO position." She shot me a triumphant look. "Perhaps he's come to discuss damage control after your little scene." I sat back, a small smile playing on my lips. I knew exactly why Thomas Roberts was here. As the head of the board, he'd been helping me prepare next week's announcement. We had a meeting scheduled for tomorrow to finalize the details, but apparently he had other plans. "Barbara." Thomas strode in, then stopped short, noticing the full dining room. "Oh, I apologize for interrupting dinner. Elizabeth, I didn't expect to find you here." Barbara's smile faltered slightly at his familiar tone with me. "Thomas, please join us. We were just discussing the CEO position." "Ah," Thomas glanced at me, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, that's actually why I'm here. There's been a leak on social media about next week's announcement. The board thinks we should move up the timeline." Barbara practically glowed. "Well, these things happen. I assume you'll want to speak with James privately." Actually, Thomas turned to me. "Elizabeth, as incoming CEO, how would you like to handle this?" The silence that followed was deafening. Barbara's fork clattered against her plate. James's father finally lowered his newspaper completely. Amanda's baby chose that moment to gleefully throw mashed potatoes across the table. "I'm sorry," Barbara's voice shook. "Did you say Elizabeth is the incoming CEO?" I slowly stood up, pulling my corporate ID from my purse. Yes, Barbara. The board appointed me 3 months ago. James and I were waiting for the official announcement, but since you're so concerned about the company's future. But that's impossible, Barbara sputtered. The Matthews family fully supports this decision, James finished, moving to stand beside me. The board voted unanimously. Mom, Elizabeth turned our struggling Pacific division around in 2 years. She's increased our market share by 40% and implemented sustainability practices that saved us millions. She earned this position. Barbara stared at my ID badge, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that looked almost like fear. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have listened? I asked quietly. In 5 years, have you ever really listened to anything about my career? The room was silent except for Amanda's baby happily squishing potatoes between his fingers. Thomas Roberts cleared his throat. Well, since we're all here, shall we discuss the press release? Elizabeth, I brought the draft for your approval. Barbara pushed back from the table, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need a moment, she whispered, hurrying from the room. I watched her go, feeling no satisfaction in her humiliation. This wasn't how I wanted her to find out, but perhaps it was for the best. As James's father finally spoke up to offer congratulations, and Amanda started asking excited questions about my plans for the company, I realized this was just the beginning. The real challenge wouldn't be running Matthews Corp., it would be helping Barbara understand that sometimes the best way to honor a family legacy is to let it evolve. Thomas touched my elbow. Elizabeth, about that press release. Yes, I said, straightening my shoulders. Let's discuss it. After all, we have a company announcement to prepare. The week following the dinner was a storm of press releases, board meetings, and carefully orchestrated public appearances. But nothing compared to the private storm brewing within the Matthews family. Barbara hadn't spoken a word to anyone after leaving the dining room that night. She'd locked herself in her study, emerging only after everyone had gone. James tried calling her multiple times, but she wouldn't answer. Give her time, James said, loosening his tie as we prepared for the official announcement ceremony. Mom's whole worldview just got shattered. I smoothed down my navy blazer, checking my reflection one last time. I understand it's a shock, but she's had 5 years to see what I'm capable of. She chose not to. The ceremony was being held in the Matthews Corp main lobby, where 3 generations of Matthews CEOs had their portraits hanging. Barbara's husband, Robert Matthews, had been the last, retiring 2 years ago. Everyone had assumed James would be next. As we walked into the lobby, I saw Barbara standing beneath her husband's portrait, perfectly coiffed in an expensive suit, her mask of composure firmly in place. But I caught the slight tremor in her hand as she clutched her purse. Elizabeth, she nodded stiffly. I suppose congratulations are in order. Before I could respond, my assistant rushed over. Mrs. Walker, we need you for the press photos. And Mrs. Matthews, the board would like you in the family section. Barbara's face tightened at my married name being used so formally. For years, she'd insisted on introducing me as James's wife, or simply Elizabeth, never acknowledging my professional identity. The ceremony began with Thomas Roberts introducing me to the assembled crowd of employees, press, and shareholders. As I took the podium, I saw Barbara whispering to some board members' wives, their heads bent together like schoolgirls sharing secrets. Matthews Corp has been a family company for 3 generations. I began my speech. That legacy of innovation, integrity, and forward-thinking leadership is what drew me here 7 years ago as a financial analyst. I saw Barbara shift uncomfortably in her seat. Today, we're not just continuing that legacy, we're expanding it. Under my leadership, Matthews Corp will launch new initiatives in sustainable technology, workplace equality, and community development. We're not just building profits, we're building a better future. The applause was genuine and enthusiastic. Even some of Barbara's friends were nodding approvingly, but Barbara sat stone-faced, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. After the ceremony, during the reception, I overheard her talking to Patricia from HR, the same one who fed her misinformation about James' promotion. It's just temporary, of course, Barbara was saying. Once James finishes his executive training program. Actually, Barbara, I interrupted, unable to stay silent any longer. James isn't in any training program. He's our new Chief Operations Officer, a position he earned through his own merit. We're partners in this, equal leaders with different strengths. Patricia excused herself quickly, leaving Barbara and me alone by the champagne fountain. Partners? Barbara's laugh was bitter. You took my son's birthright. No one took anything. James appeared beside me. Mom, I recommended Elizabeth for CEO. The board agreed unanimously because she was the best person for the job. Barbara's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide her shock. You recommended her. Yes, James stood firm. Because unlike you, I've actually paid attention to what Elizabeth has accomplished. Did you know she was headhunted by 3 major companies last year? She chose to stay here, to build something with me, despite how you've treated her. I was protecting our family legacy, Barbara hissed. No, I said quietly. You were protecting your idea of legacy. But a true legacy grows and adapts. Look around, Barbara. The company is stronger than ever. The stock price is up 15% just on today's announcement. Your family's legacy isn't being destroyed. It's evolving. Barbara glanced around the room, seeing the excited faces of employees, the approving nods of board members, the positive energy that filled the space. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw uncertainty in her eyes. The portrait, she finally said. They'll want to hang your portrait with the others. Yes, I replied, right next to Robert's. Your family wall will have a new addition. Our family wall, James corrected gently. Mom, Elizabeth isn't an outsider taking over. She's my wife, your daughter-in-law, and now the CEO. It's time to accept that. Barbara's shoulders sagged slightly. The first real crack in her armor I'd seen in 5 years. I need some time, she whispered, turning away. As we watched her leave, James squeezed my hand. That went better than expected. She didn't throw anything. I laughed despite myself. Small victories. But James, this isn't over. I know, he sighed. But something's different this time. Did you see her face when you mentioned the stock price? I nodded. Barbara might not respect me as a daughter-in-law, but she'd always respected money. Maybe that was the key to building a bridge, showing her that protecting the family legacy and embracing change aren't mutually exclusive. My assistant appeared with a stack of papers requiring immediate attention. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of Barbara standing in front of the CEO portraits again. This time she was looking at the empty space where my portrait would hang, her expression unreadable. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had shifted, and as I headed to my first official board meeting as CEO, I realized that sometimes the hardest part of leadership isn't running a company. It's changing hearts and minds, one small victory at a time. 3 months into my role as CEO, the company was thriving. Our new sustainability initiative had attracted major investors, employee satisfaction scores were at an all-time high, and even the most skeptical board members had become strong supporters. But one person remained unconvinced. Barbara had taken to sending passive-aggressive emails about preserving company traditions and showing up unannounced at board meetings as a concerned family stakeholder. Each time she'd sit in the back, watching me with a mixture of resentment and calculation. Everything came to a head at the annual Matthews Corp Charity Gala. As the first female CEO, all eyes were on me, and Barbara knew it. I was in my office reviewing my speech when my assistant rushed in. Mrs. Walker, there's a situation. Mrs. Matthews is in the ballroom, rearranging the seating chart. I found Barbara moving name cards at the head table, her pearl necklace gleaming under the chandeliers. "Oh, Elizabeth," she said sweetly, "I'm just ensuring the traditional family seating arrangement is maintained. You understand, of course." I picked up my name card, which she'd moved to a table near the kitchen. "Barbara, we both know what you're doing." "I'm preserving protocol," she sniffed. "The Matthews family has always." "The CEO sits at the head table," I interrupted firmly. "That's the protocol you're so fond of, and I am the CEO." Through manipulation, she hissed, dropping her sweet facade. "You may have fooled the board, but I know what you really are, an opportunist who married my son for his position." "Mom?" James's voice cut through the tension. He stood in the doorway, holding a folder. "I've been looking for you both. There's something you need to see." Barbara straightened her jacket. "Whatever it is can wait until after I fix this seating disaster." "Actually," James stepped forward, "it can't. Remember last week when you told the Robinson family I was the real decision maker and that they should discuss their contract with me instead of Elizabeth?" Barbara's face paled slightly. "I was protecting our relationships." You were undermining the CEO, James said, opening the folder. And it cost us. The Robinsons delayed signing because they weren't sure who was actually in charge. Our stock dropped 3 points. Barbara faltered. Mom, this has to stop. Elizabeth isn't just my wife or your daughter-in-law. She's the CEO chosen by the board, supported by our shareholders, and he paused, endorsed by Dad. Barbara's head snapped up. What? James pulled out a letter. Dad left this with his retirement papers. It was supposed to be opened when the new CEO was announced. He recommended Elizabeth. With trembling hands, Barbara took the letter. I watched as she read her husband's words, her carefully constructed world crumbling further. Robert knew, she whispered. He wanted this. He saw what you refused to see, James said gently. Elizabeth isn't destroying our legacy, she's securing its future. Barbara sank into a nearby chair, the letter clutched to her chest. For the first time, I saw past her perfect facade to the woman who'd spent decades defining herself through her family's company, only to see it change in ways she never expected. Barbara, I said softly, I know you love this company. So do I. That's why I've worked so hard to protect and grow it. Maybe it's time we work together instead of against each other. She looked up, tears threatening to ruin her immaculate makeup. How? Be my advisor, I suggested. You know this company's history better than anyone. Help me understand its heart while I guide its future. You want that? Suspicion warred with hope in her voice. After everything. The Matthews legacy isn't just about who sits in the CEO's office, I said. It's about family, innovation, and growth. We can honor that legacy better together than apart. Barbara stood slowly, smoothing her skirt with shaking hands. She walked to the head table and picked up my name card. For a moment, she stared at it, decades of tradition battling with the reality of change. Finally, she placed it at the center position. The CEO's chair, she said quietly, where you earned the right to sit. That evening, as I delivered my speech about the company's future, I saw Barbara in the audience. For the first time, she wasn't glaring or whispering to her friends. She was listening. Later, as the gala wound down, she approached me with 2 glasses of champagne. I hear you're expanding the Pacific Division again, she said, handing me a glass. Yes, I replied cautiously. We're looking at several potential locations. The Singapore market is promising, she offered. Robert considered it years ago, but the timing wasn't right. I smiled. I'd love to hear more about that. As we discussed business opportunities, I caught James watching us with a relieved smile. The war was finally over, not with a dramatic battle, but with a quiet conversation and a simple acknowledgement of change. Barbara would never be an easy mother-in-law, and she'd probably always have opinions about how things should be done. But as we stood there discussing the company's future, I realized that sometimes the strongest legacies are built not by holding onto the past, but by finding ways to blend it with the future. And maybe that was the greatest victory of all.